Welcome to Flunking the Written, a fully spoiled Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast in which two Uber fans break down every episode of the show. Join Kimberly and Megan every Tuesday as they overanalyze each scene and discuss the Buffyverse at large. Now let's meet up with the Scoobies and get into this week's episode of Flunking the Written.
What can I say? I flunked the written.
Alright, Kim, so we're going to get into our discussion of Halloween. This episode was written by Carl Ellsworth and directed by Bruce Seth Green, and the blurb is, after renting Halloween costumes from an unusual shop, Buffy and her friends literally begin turning into whatever costume they are wearing.
Which I have to say is one of the more fairly accurate blurbs.
Yeah.
We've heard. It pretty much describes what happened.
I will discuss this a little bit in the episode. The literally begin to turning into whatever costume they are wearing leaves some open to interpretation things for me. This is a fan favorite episode, and I completely agree that it is probably one of the most enjoyable episodes of Buffy. It's just an absolute laugh riot. There's so many good lines, so many good moments, just kind of a fun episode. This episode falls apart a lot when you overanalyze it.
Well, yeah.
But I enjoy it immensely, even so.
I think a lot of the more fun episodes start to fall apart when you overanalyze them. Like, the majority of them do.
Yeah. Like, just, if you kind of just turn your brain off and just enjoy the comedy of the moment, this episode is absolutely fantastic. It is just a joy, a delight to behold. But when we get to, like, the way that this spell works, and then things like repercussions afterwards...
there should be way more.
There's gonna be a lot. There's a lot to discuss. So the episode starts in a pumpkin patch type setup. And Buffy is fighting a random vampire, and this fight scene lasts incredibly long.
It does.
And I know you got this whole bit with the vampire recording her, and it gives enough material for Spike to analyze later in the episode. But man, it took her a long time to take out this single vampire.
Yeah, it was one of the longer fight scenes.
And I almost wonder, because I assume Spike sent the vampire to fight Buffy. I assume this is one of Spike's vamps. So I wonder if he picked one that he knew would give Buffy enough of a challenge to give him, like, enough stuff to analyze. Like, if he was just
Possibly.
like, I'm going to just send this, like, vampire with immense potential that, like, just is an incredible fighter, just so he can go and die at the hands of the Slayer so I can study her.
That sounds like something Spike would do, though.
It's pretty incredible, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fight lasts a while. There's quite a bit of back and forth while this vampire is recording the entire thing. Is this our first evidence that you can see a vampire on a camera?
I think it might be.
All right, so there you go. We just assume that there's with this particular camera, there's no mirrors, and then there's other stuff later that makes you scratch your head too, in the series. But yeah, she eventually dusts the vampire with a sign from the pumpkin patch and walks off as the vampire who was filming the entire thing kind of creeps back into the shadows, and then it goes to credits.
Yes.
Kind of a weird cold opening. And then we start at the Bronze, and we have a song playing. It's Shy by Epperley, I guess is how you pronounce the name of the band. And Angel is waiting for Buffy. And this is when I get to start talking about Cordelia in this episode. And I have to say, Cordelia is my favorite part about this episode.
I mean, everybody is great in this episode.
But Cordelia is like, she cranked it up to 11 in this episode. She is so fantastic.
Yeah. Cordelia and Willow both are great in this episode. I would like to talk about how here Cordelia, she runs into Angel at the Bronze and is sitting flirting with him and mentions that she's supposed supposed to be meeting Devin, but he has flaked on her. So we are back to dating Devin.
Yeah.
And have apparently forgotten about Jonathan, who she was with at the end of the last episode.
She dated two people
And
in
Richard-
between dating Devin.
Yeah. She is dating. I never realized how much they do that to her and have her dating someone new every episode. But yeah, we're back to Devin. And she is flirting with Angel by talking about Devin a lot.
Uh-huh.
And then Buffy comes in and sees them flirting. Well, sees them talking to each other and starts to leave. And Angel sees her and goes over to her, and they kind of have a conversation about how she looks because she was just fighting a vampire. And in the episode, she actually looks fine. Her hair's like a little messy, but that's it.
Yeah, there's like a couple of like little bits of hay sticking out of it. I don't even really like notice it unless I really pay attention.
So in the script book, her clothes are supposed to be ripped and stained. Hay all over them and her. And she's supposed to have pumpkin mush all over her clothes and in her hair.
Yeah, that would have been too much.
They didn't do that. But I'm saying that is the description in the script book, though.
Yeah. That would have been too much. I can kind of buy that, like, this amount of messiness Buffy wouldn't have catched beforehand and been like, oh, I gotta clean up before going on this date with Angel, which has been building up forever. But the pumpkin mush, I think, would have caused me pause. I mean, like, she probably would have cleaned that off before entering the process. But
she acts like in the conversation, she acts like she is covered in pumpkin mush.
Covered in pumpkin mush. And this
she's
starts,
like way more upset than the way she looks.
Yeah, and this starts my first real problem when you really start to analyze this episode is Buffy doesn't really make sense in this episode, and also it seems like we've like taken a few steps back in the Buffy Angel relationship.
Yeah.
Compared to where we've seen it already several times. It's like they're at the awkward, like, trying to figure out if they like each other phase. I'm just like, you two totally already know that you like each other. Buffy, you don't have to prove anything to him. You know he likes you.
Yeah. They every episode that has had Angel and Angel in it so far is basically been a do we like each other enough to do this? Will this work? Although I will say this is the last one that does that. Because after this, they end this episode with a kind of a makeout session in Buffy's room.
Yeah.
And the next episode, they are, in fact, a couple, finally.
Finally. But yeah, Buffy is super embarrassed and, like, has this moment after Cordelia comes in and is Cordelia again, and it's wonderful because it's Cordelia. But she has this moment where she's like, dating is for normal girls, and I'm just like, you're trying to date a vampire.
That's not really normal.
I don't think he's like after just a normal girl relationship.
Yeah, and Buffy does not seem like herself in this one. I agree with you.
Yeah, but Buffy eventually just leaves, and Cordelia brings Angel a cappuccino.
Yes.
Which is just delightful.
And then we are in the hallway at Sunnydale High, and Snyder is grabbing students and forcing them to volunteer for a safe trick-or-treat type thing, where they take a group of kids whose parents can't do it trick-or-treating. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, who would do this? Who would sign their kids up here to be taken trick-or-treating by a random teenager that volunteered for it at school that you have never met or spoken to? It just seems so dangerous. And, like, I realize, like, people weren't as protective of their kids in the past as we are now, but this was 1998. This was not, like, 1955.
Yeah.
Like, it's no.
Yeah. Also, like, not only is it the danger factor, but, like, wouldn't you just expect either the kids to overindulge on candy before they got it home to where you wouldn't eat? Like, I mean, the teenagers don't care. Or, even worse, the teenagers, like, taking the candy from the kids.
Yeah. Or, treating them badly or, whatever. And the hours of this program are from 4 to 6.
I had that in my notes, too, which
Like, it didn't even get dark until like 5:30 in October.
I was trying to figure that out because it is definitely like dark for the trick-or-treating, or at least I guess towards the end of trick-or-treating it's definitely dark, so maybe that tracks. I don't know, it seems like a weird time.
I mean,
for
it
that
seems like it's
program.
dark for all of it.
Yeah, it's confusing at best.
And also this part where Snyder tells her that Halloween must be a big night for her, tossing eggs and king cars, and you're not going to do that this year because you're going to take care of these kids. And I'm like, it's from 4 to 6. She's got plenty of time after she brings the kids back to go toss eggs, whatever that is. I think he meant egging cars and toilet paper houses and smash pumpkins or whatever she's going to do, which seems like things 12-year-old boys would do, not 16-year-old girls. But okay. He acts like she's, tied up till midnight.
Yeah.
And will have no time to do anything else. And I'm like, she can still cause some mayhem if she wanted to.
But yeah, and
So now they're talking and they've decided that, or they are talking about how now that they have to do this, they have to get costumes. Because costumes are mandatory. And Buffy mentions that Halloween, according to Giles, is dead for the undead. Nothing happens, they stay in. And I just put in my notes that every single Halloween episode, this is expected. It's like a thing. The monsters and the demons, they take Halloween off. But that never actually happens. So I'm not sure why they still believe it.
Well, in season 6, she does say, like, I should patrol on Halloween because, even though they're not supposed to go out on Halloween, we clearly seem to have a pattern that counters that idea. So she does wise up by, like, the end of the series. But yeah, it is one of those funny things that keeps getting brought up. But yeah, I like the idea of, I guess it's just too commercial or too expected, so vampires are just like, nah.
No, we'll stay in tonight.
But yeah, after that conversation, Xander dismisses himself to go get a soda, and we get introduced to Larry, who comes to talk.
Wait, before we do this scene, can we just talk about how old the soda machine looks? Like, I don't really remember what soda machines in the late 90s look like, but this in my head, and I don't know if I'm just old, but it looks like something from like the 70s to me.
I also have a note about the soda machine because it dispenses a Diet Dr. Pepper, which is not one of the options on the soda machine.
Which I noticed it didn't dispense what he asked for, or what he asked for, but I didn't notice it wasn't even a thing. That's great. But, like, how old is this machine? It looks so old.
Well, clearly it must be because it doesn't work right.
Well, good point.
But yeah, Larry comes to talk about Buffy and ask if Xander is dating her, which kind of is a baffling thing to think that might be is like Xander trying to spread these rumors. Like, who believes that these two are dating?
Well, I mean, it is high school and they are a male and a female who spend a lot of time together.
Yeah, a
lot of people probably just assume.
It was an interesting like moment for me where I was just like, I guess people could be in that knowledge. I do like that Xander's reply is not dating so much, but have a solid foundation for future bliss.
Yeah. Well, and then Larry, and watching this scene, knowing the things that happen to Larry later, it's just funny to me because I'm like, oh, you're trying so hard.
He really is.
But it starts, and it's so obvious, and you don't think that the first time you watch through, he's trying so hard. But he makes a comment about how he heard that Buffy was fast, and Xander immediately goes defensive and protective. Mm-hmm. And grabs Larry and says he's going to do something damn manly. Which is funny. Then Larry starts to punch Xander, and Buffy is there. Mm-hmm. And grabs his hand and pushes him into the Coke machine and tells him to leave. And he leaves. Which,
Xander's poor ego.
Oh, poor Xander. Poor Xander. Which he explains to Buffy that black eyes heal, but a reputation as a sissy man will last forever. Willow has a line here, which I just think is funny. She goes, poor Xander, boys are so fragile. And I love that line. Boys are so fragile.
It's one of those lines. I mean, it's kind of funny in the moment, but I think it shows like a little bit of weird growth in a way, like a little bit of a sign that maybe she's starting to move on from Xander. To be kind of in that state of just being like, oh, it's just Xander being Xander, whatever.
Well, I will point out, I just love that line because I live with 5 men, with my husband and my sons, and 5 boys, and boys are fragile. They are fragile. And Willow and Buffy are talking about last night and Buffy going to meet Angel and how Cordelia was flirting with him. And Willow says, no, she's not his type. Like she knows, you know.
And the little, Angel Cordelia shipper and me giggles.
She's not his type right now. They start talking about the Watcher Diaries and how they could look at those and see what type of women Angel liked when he was alive.
Yeah, which is just a convoluted way to try to figure that out.
Yeah, a little bit. And it's actually Buffy's kind of a little bit going back to the way she was with Owen. When she was so obsessed, trying to be what he wanted, which she's never been like with Angel. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of...
Yeah. It's so weird on multiple levels because, like, oh, we gotta know what Angel's type is. And I'm just like, I'm pretty sure we've established that Angel's type is Buffy.
Yeah.
I think we've got that part figured out. But beyond that, if you're trying to research, like, 18th century women, why is the Watcher's Diaries your only, like, option?
Oh, yeah, because there should be, like, lots of options, in the entire library. Or online. Or
yeah.
Anywhere.
I mean, anywhere. Go and talk to your history teacher. Something.
Well, they decide they're going to steal the Watcher's Diaries. Honestly, if it was me and I was trying to steal the Watcher's Diaries, I would be interested way more than what the girls look like.
Yeah.
In that time period.
And
there's
also,
probably so much cool information in those.
Like, there's nothing implied anywhere else in the series that the Slayers don't just have access to the Watcher's Diaries if they request them.
Yeah.
Like, I would assume that would be helpful for the Slayer. But again, the Watcher's Council does a lot of stuff that isn't helpful for the Slayer, so maybe.
True.
But there is definitely a period later in the series where Buffy is looking through the Watcher's Diaries with Giles there. Like, they're just looking at them together. So I don't know why that wouldn't just be something she has access to.
It might be at this point she doesn't know she has access.
Yeah. Or they just want to be sneaky. Sometimes you just want to be sneaky.
They do a very, very sneaky little scam to go in and steal the Watcher's Diaries. While Buffy distracts Giles, Willow goes in and gets them.
Yeah. And this scene is hilarious. Buffy, like, distracting Giles is absolutely hilarious. But it's also one of those that kind of falls apart because, like, Giles is not, like, falling for it until, like, Buffy just randomly starts talking about Miss Calendar.
How come Halloween is such a big yawner? I mean, do the demons just hate how commercial it's become?
It's interesting. Not, I suspect, to you. What is it you're after?
Of course it's of interest to me. I'm the Slayer. I need to know these things. You can't keep me in the dark any longer. Look at me when I talk to you.
I really don't have time for these
Miss Calendar said you were a babe.
She said what?
She said that you were a hunk of burning something or other. So, what do you think of that?
I don't, a burning hunk of what?
You were already suspicious of her, and then she's like, oh, Miss Calendar says you're a babe. And he's just like, well, now I believe that you're actually earnest and not trying to get away with something.
And then she goes even further, and she said, you're a hunk of burning something. And I'm like, he would not believe that she said that. But he does. And Willow gets the books and heads out with them. And then Buffy makes up a real quick excuse to leave. And Giles talks to himself saying, a babe. I can live with it. Which is really cute.
Yeah.
As we don't see Jenny. We don't see Jenny in this episode.
Yeah. We see a lot of people in this episode.
We see almost everyone else, but we don't see Jenny. Then we have a scene where Buffy and Willow are looking at the Watcher's Diaries, and they're hiding in the bathroom, sitting on the sinks looking at them. Mm-hmm. And I'll just say I had some notes on this because the script book, because, I read through the script before I watched the episode, and the script book says that they're sitting in a corner on the bathroom floor looking at him. And I'm just like, ew.
Yeah.
That's just gross. Why are you sitting on the bathroom floor?
To be fair, it's probably more sanitary than the sinks. I mean,
see, the sinks just don't seem as bad to me.
Yeah.
That's probably all yucky.
Yeah, it's probably all yucky. But I imagine the sinks are probably not very like,
there's literally always an empty classroom at the school.
Yeah.
Why not just go to an empty classroom? Or outside on the lawn or a bench or anywhere.
It's the girls' room. Giles can't walk into the girls' room, so it's fine.
But Giles doesn't leave the library.
He avoids the rest of the school like the plague.
But they find a picture of a girl who's very pretty and wearing a dress, and how she was a noblewoman, so being beautiful was her job. And Willow, to make Buffy feel better, says she's got a funny waist. See how tiny it is? And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, Willow's just a gem. I do like how after Buffy's kind of just like, fantasizing about the life that girl must have lived, Willow's just like, I still think I'd prefer being able to vote.
Yeah.
I'm just like, you go, Willow. So then Cordelia comes in and kind of talks about how she was there to comfort Angel, and this is the moment that we realize, and I honestly think it would have been like a, oh yeah, moment for me too, if I had watched through this in order, be like, oh yeah, Cordelia just would have no reason to know that Angel's a vampire.
Yes, she does not know that he's a vampire, and they try to tell her, and she does not believe them. Although I don't think that there is ever a time when Cordelia realizes it. I think there's just like an episode later where she already knows.
Yeah.
Like there's no big, oh, he is a vampire, you were right moment. She just, later she knows.
Yeah, eventually.
Which I feel like we got cheated
it.
not getting to see that. I'm just saying. And the I told you so look on Willow's face.
But yeah. So Cordelia's like stretch of dialogue here is some of my favorite stuff. It is so compelling and so like absolutely Cordelia, and like by the end of it, Buffy like is genuinely like taken aback, and I just think it's great, even though I still feel like that's out of character for Buffy, but the entire speech is just fantastic, and I'm willing to accept it in this moment just because I'm just like, yeah, Cordelia is just my queen. I love her in this moment, and it's just fantastic.
You know what I think? I just think you're trying to scare me off because you're afraid of the competition. Look, Buffy, you may be hot stuff when it comes to demonology or whatever, but when it comes to dating, I'm the Slayer.
And then our next scene is in Ethan's costume shop. And
Can I just say that Buffy like playing with the little like plastic pumpkin and then it starts to scream and she like panics and put it down is like the realest thing.
Yes, I love it. This is the description of the shop is a musty, rundown shop in the wrong part of town. Just so you know, it is not supposed to be like the new popular costume shop where everyone's at and it's packed. It's supposed to be rundown. I don't know.
It doesn't.
The description is different from what it is.
There are definitely some decisions that were made on the set, but yeah, it makes a lot more sense for it to be like a happening spot, considering how many people changed later on. But
and see, I just wonder if maybe that many weren't supposed to change.
Maybe, I don't know.
But we have Willow, and she shows her classic costume she's picked out, and it's basically a sheet with holes in it that says "boo."
And she's so like genuinely excited about it when she shows it. And then Buffy's just like, Willow, come on. And she's like, it's not scary enough.
And Buffy kind of gives her a pep talk about letting herself out there because it's Halloween and you can, be something you're not. Yeah. But Willow's like, no.
Her whole speech about like, oh, it's Halloween, you should get sexy and wild. I'm like, the only reason you're buying costumes is to take kids out trick-or-treating. You should not get sexy and wild. That is not appropriate.
Well, maybe they plan to go to the Bronze after or something. Now. But yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think of that.
Oh, so Xander comes up and he has his $2 toy gun and explains that he has army fatigues at home and brags about his bargain shopping, which I appreciate as a bargain shopper myself. I am a fan of of saving a dime here or there. Buffy apologizes to Xander about not letting him get pummeled, and just like kind of one of like the cutest, most endearing exchanges between these two over like the stupidest conflict.
It's really cute.
As Xander's explaining, oh, I think I could have taken him, Buffy like just walks off because she has found her costume, this wonderful 18th century dress that does not look authentic in any way, shape, or form, but she is just mesmerized by the pretty ruffles and the little details all over it, and walks to the corner and kind of talks about just how pretty it is, and Xander's like, nope, I prefer my women in spandex.
Yeah, too bulky, like spandex. And then we have Ethan Rain come up, who's the shop owner, and basically talks her into it, saying, oh, look at the princess and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And she says she can't afford it. And he says that he feels quite moved to make you a deal you can't refuse. And at this point, I have in my notes, did he know who she was?
I have the same exact thing. It's like
was
did
he trying
know?
to... Yeah.
Yeah.
Because later... he mentioned, I mean, he knows about the Slayer.
Mm-hmm.
He knows that Giles is there to watch a Slayer.
Yeah.
Because he says it. Does he know that's who Buffy is? And if he doesn't, why does he care if this random girl is made
He has
into
to.
a 18th century woman?
No, I have the exact same thing in my notes. Like, he has to know that she's the Slayer.
Yeah, because he's very much, I really want to have you wear this.
Mm-hmm. So... this is our first introduction of Ethan Rain, who I will say I think is the most underutilized character in the Buffyverse. I really would have loved to have a little bit more Ethan Rain because he's just fantastic. I love Robin Sachs' performance, and I love just having someone who simply worships chaos and using that as an excuse for all of these kind of fun things that happen throughout the series. It works so well, and I'm so like upset that we kind of lose him after season 4.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there could have been more episodes with him too.
Yeah. I think it's a missed opportunity not only for the fact that you got a great actor and a great performance out of him, but it's also a missed opportunity for developing Giles perhaps a little bit more as well, in a couple of episodes where they had more interaction. I think could have done more with Giles's backstory.
The next scene is the factory.
Mm-hmm.
And we have Spike watching some TVs, and he's watching the fight with Buffy. And
so yeah, as he is watching these screens, he is like overanalyzing all of her fight tactics, rewinding it over and over again, talking about how, you know, she's tricky and like clearly is impressed and excited about the challenge and all of that. Like there's a lot of fun stuff to analyze here about like the Buffy and Spike relationship and kind of what's already starting here perhaps in Spike's head. But because he's watching these videos a lot, and we know that Spike has shown some tendencies to study fight tactics. We see that in season 5 of Angel with Illyria, and you know, like he is kind of someone who will study, but he's also very much a like fly by the seat of his pants, ride or die kind of guy. And so like the fact that he's spending so much time studying Buffy could already show a little bit of obsession forming, perhaps me reading a little bit too much. Obviously none of this was developed at this point, but again, I like those little things that point to the future that were unintentional. I'm just like, you're really like rewinding this video a lot, Spike. Are you okay? Drusilla comes in, and perhaps my absolute most beloved exchange between these two happens, where she asks, "Do you love my insides, the parts you can't see?" And Spike replies with, "Eyeballs to entrails, my sweet," which is a fantastic exchange, but also like every time I like watch Buffy, I'm reminded when we get to Full for Love in season 5 that we don't know that Spike's a poet until that episode. Like, we don't understand that William was a poet as a human. And so, like, there's all these little things that we see in, like, the early seasons of Spike before that's revealed that you're just like, oh, man, yeah. Eyeballs to entrails. That is just poetry. It's just fantastic.
Vampire poetry.
I quite like it. I think it's romantic.
And I think this is the first time that we learn that Drew has visions.
Yes.
That Drusilla can see the future.
Drew
And
is
she either gets it very, very cryptically, or she is just so insane that she can only share what she sees very, very cryptically. Because she is not logical
yeah.
with what she tells you. It's always some kind of riddle to figure out. And I don't know if that's how she gets it or if that's just what she tells people because she's that crazy.
I also like that Drew's powers are never really like explained. They just randomly unlock in certain episodes where you're like, oh, and now she can do this thing, and now she can do this thing. She's just like, she is so powerful. It is quite terrifying when you think about how much power Drew holds. But she is incredibly powerful. And this is our first indication of just like how much power she has with this little vision thing, and like it's very casual, like when Spike reacts to it, like this is something that she can just do.
He knows.
He can just do. Like he's like, oh, you had a vision, and she kind of explains that someone's coming tomorrow, and he's just like, but tomorrow's Halloween, and she's just like, but someone's come to change it all, and you're just like, yeah, nothing really super helpful in the vision, but it is one of those moments you're just like, holy crap, she has visions?
Well, she does say that the Slayer will be weak.
Yeah.
Okay, and so now we have a hand. We see a hand lighting candles, and it's Ethan. Mm-hmm. And he is doing some kind of ritual and chanting around a statue. Yeah, he's like starting a thing. And then we're in Buffy's room, and she is standing in front of a mirror in her costume, kind of staring at herself. And Buffy and her talking about meeting Angel after trick-or-treating, stuff like that. And then Willow comes out of the bathroom. And Willow is not dressed like Willow. She's got her hair piled up and a halter top and a mini skirt and tall boots and looks very, very hot.
But also, like, what is her costume?
It says in the script book that her costume is Rocker Babe.
Rocker Babe. Yeah, that was definitely Buffy's idea.
It is a costume. Yeah, it says it is a costume Buffy picked out for her. Rocker Babe. Yeah. And Buffy has to kind of talk her into not putting the sheet on to be a ghost. They hear the doorbell ring, and Buffy goes down to meet Xander, who talks about how beautiful she is and says he completely renounces spending.
Yeah, real progress. Yeah. Real progress shown.
And then says, wait till you see, and turns around, and here comes Willow covered in her ghost costume. Oh.
So then we're over at the school, and everybody's kind of prepping for trick-or-treating. Buffy's with her group of kids, and Snyder's being Snyder. That's really the only way to explain it. And then you get a little second interaction between Larry and Xander, where Larry's kind of teasing Xander about how Buffy defended him. Then you have this absolutely fantastic exchange between Cordelia and Oz, and this is another one of those times where I just wrote everything about this scene I love.
There's two things I want to point out before we get to that.
Okay.
The first one is, in the script book, when Larry comes up to Xander, it says that he's dressed as a pirate, and his costume is even less than Xander's. It's regular clothes and an eye patch. So he's just like wearing a t-shirt and shorts and an eye patch. And I'll point this out because later I'm going to say something that this will be important for.
Okay.
And then there is a scene where Principal Snyder is giving the kids that Buffy's going to take trick-or-treating to her. And he says, you can't talk to them. Just bring them back in one piece and I won't expel you. And like actually gets onto her a minute later when she attempts to talk to them. And it's just like, really? She's kind of got to talk to them. And also, you can't expel her for not taking kids trick-or-treating perfectly. Like, it's just ridiculous the way he talks. And it annoys me.
Yeah,
Because I'm
Snyder-
like, none of this makes sense.
Snyder being Snyder. The idea that he thinks, oh, I can force her to volunteer for this position and then threaten expulsion if she doesn't do it the exact way that I want her to do it.
Yeah.
There's no logic to that. So then we get to a scene between Cordelia and Oz, which is...
And it is, you are correct, it's wonderful.
Oh,
It is
man.
just wonderful.
It is. Every line of dialogue just is the most hilarious thing.
Oz,
Hey, Cordelia. Geez, you're like a great big cat.
that's my costume. Are you guys playing tonight?
Yeah, at the shelter club.
Is Mr. I'm the lead singer, I'm so great, I don't have to show up for my date or even call gonna be there?
Yeah, he's just going by Devin now.
Well, you can tell him that I don't care, and that I didn't even mention it, and that I didn't even see you. So that's just fine.
So what do I tell him?
Nothing. Jeez, get with the program.
Why can't I meet a nice girl like that?
Then we get through all of that, and we have Oz turning around and bumping into Willow, who he does not know because boo.
Yeah, she is in a ghost costume.
But
And
yeah,
they say sorry to each other like
18 times. It's just ridiculous. It's such a lovely meet cute where they don't actually realize that they're meeting each other. This scene also I really enjoy. I like Xander giving instructions on sleazing extra candy to his group of trick-or-treaters.
Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, I think it's funny that he has 5 in his group and Buffy only had 3.
Well, and I like later on it shows Willow and she's got like 6. So I don't know if just Buffy's like the least trustworthy in Snyder's eyes, so she gets fewer.
I don't know. It's kind of weird.
So then we're trick-or-treating, and Buffy with her group are seeing their latest haul, and it's toothbrushes, because there's always that one house. And then it's ritual time, and we kind of cut back and forth between Ethan finishing up the ritual and all of the kids kind of getting set up in different locations. And then Ethan announces showtime, and everybody starts to change.
And turn into their costume.
There's a surprising amount of kids dressing as demons.
Yeah, I saw that too. And like, where are all the kids dressed as superheroes? And like, we don't see any little girls dressed as princesses crying in the street. They're all demons.
Well, it is Sunnydale, so I don't know if they've just learned.
Or like the toddler that's dressed as a pumpkin. Like, are we going to turn into a pumpkin?
Well, I'm
Like,
pretty
is
sure
Mom
Buffy.
pushing the stroller down the street and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden there's a pumpkin in it? Like, how does this work?
Aw. I'm pretty
I'm like,
sure Buffy also had one in her group that was dressed as a bunny.
Yeah, and bumblebees are also very popular for the
Oh,
toddler
no.
preschool crowd.
Oh no,
Like, how does that work?
that scares me.
Right? Wake up inside a beehive or something. I mean, like, become, a 3-year-old inside a beehive again.
Ow.
Right? Like, there's lots of stuff about this that falls apart. It's like, all of the kids in Sunnydale are not being taken trick-or-treating by high school kids. There's some parents, I'm assuming, are taking their own kids trick-or-treating. Mm-hmm. And they're not dressed up, but their kids are. And so they see this happen and are like freaked out because now they have a pumpkin where their baby used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Oh yeah.
Or a piece of candy corn or whatever they dress their baby as.
And there's going to be additional things to discuss about like how this spell actually works and some of the weird inconsistencies of it. But yeah, Willow kind of like steps out of her costume and is just in the like rocker babe outfit and says, "I'm a real ghost." And then the most hilarious thing to me is that she hears gunfire and immediately says, "Xander." When you look at like the distance that she runs, I'm just like, there'd be no way that you would be able to know that was Xander. So why?
Yeah.
Just spontaneous gunfire. Oh, it must be Xander.
And like, she realizes she's a ghost I guess she just realizes really quick and comes to the conclusion that Xander now has a real machine gun.
I don't know. Like, it's one of those that
Because literally the only part of Xander's costume that he bought at Ethan's costume shop was the machine gun.
Uh-huh.
So is that, like, enough to turn him into a soldier? Because, like, he
apparently
already had the clothes he bought at an army surplus store. And there are several points in this episode where he puts the gun down.
Yeah.
He's still a soldier.
Yeah, it's
like, so just that one thing is enough to turn him into a soldier guy.
Yeah, this is what makes Ethan like a particularly nasty villain, is because this isn't like, oh, they remove the costume and then they're suddenly not that thing anymore. It's clear that this is like a permanent change until the statue is broken at the end. It is quite a like sadistic spell.
Yeah, but it's not just that like he puts the gun down, so he's removed that part of the costume and he doesn't change back. But that gun is enough to change who he is. And that's the only part he bought at the costume store.
Yeah.
Everything else he had.
So here's my question. If somebody bought an item and then repurposed it for a costume other than what it was initially meant for, do they turn into what the item was originally meant for, or do they turn into what their costume actually is? Because he could have bought that gun to be like...
a mobster.
Yeah, I don't know. Like G.I. Joe. I don't know. I guess that's kind of the same thing.
Or a mobster.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Or something, Al Capone.
Yeah. Like...
Would it be Al Capone? Or is it just that gun turns you into a soldier?
I don't know. So... Here's my actual thought on how this spell works. We'll get into this now, because there's some things that'll happen later on that I was kind of waiting for, but we'll get into this now, because we've already kind of broached this subject, is that this spell has to... the only way that this spell makes sense is it's the way that the person who is wearing the costume imagines that thing. Because Buffy's not a true, 18th century girl. She is her, imaginings of what that would be like. And when asked about what year she thinks it is, she says specifically 1775, which is the exact year of the girl from the Watcher's diary. So you can tell that it is her interpretation of what that would be, what that girl would be like, and not actually what 18th century women were like.
So that means Willow is what she thinks a ghost would be like.
Yeah. And this is where it falls apart later in the series, because Xander somehow magically, knows a bunch of army training and things after this, which doesn't match with how everybody else, reacted to the spell.
Yeah, because Xander is not really what you would think Xander imagines a soldier to be. He's actually, a pretty good soldier. Yeah.
Which, I mean, if he's basing it off of, action movies and things like that, I could kind of see, because he is very, action movie, I think that kind of tracks. The fact that after this he suddenly knows the layout to army bases in Sunnydale is really confusing.
I think it's even more confusing that there's an army base in Sunnydale.
That comes equipped with rocket launchers. I mean, they just have rocket launchers stockpiled in this army base in Sunnydale.
It's a very strategic military location.
Well, we do learn later on that, the government is in on, the demons and stuff. So maybe there's some reasoning there. The spell definitely falls apart when really trying to think about it. But
there is some hilarious conversation throughout the rest of the show.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic.
Willow has the best one-liners.
So, yeah, after this kind of exchange between Willow and Xander, when they're just trying to figure out, and we realize that Willow knows what's going on and Xander doesn't. He's completely in soldier mode and doesn't know anything about the reality of what's happening. And then you have the joke about Buffy passing out when they ask, what should we do? And you have all of these kind of funny bits. Down?
Buffy shows up and her hair is not in a big updo anymore. It's now, one thing, it's really long and I mean, like, there's no context of how this hair came down. That bothers me.
Well, I mean, we see like when the kids have the demon masks, it really just kind of covers their face, and then it like morphs and covers the rest of it. Her hair morphed, I guess. It was morphine hair.
Morphine hair.
Morphine hair. I'm trademarking that. And then we have like just great back and forths of, you know, she's not Buffy, who's Buffy? Oh, this is fun. Just like hilarious like bits again and again and again. Okay.
And they get even better when Cordelia shows up later.
Yeah. So I'm gonna gripe about something here though, because this is a pet peeve of mine, but I am so sick of like them having like people from points of history in modern times thinking that a car is a demon. It really bothers me, and I don't know why, but I just
happened again?
Yeah, it happens in an episode of Angel when they all think that they're 17, and Angel thinks a bunch of cars are demons. And I'm just like, cars are not that different from carriages. I think you would be able to figure it out. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. I really don't like it.
If they were like further back in history than the 18th century.
Yeah, maybe.
Like the 13th or 14th century, they might think it was a demon.
Yeah, but they do that gag twice in the Buffyverse, both with Buffy and Angel, and I'm just like, no. So they decide to get off the streets, and they head to Buffy's house, and Joyce is gone, which they established earlier in the episode that she would be, so that all works out.
Which is good.
That would have been a tough one to explain. I don't know what, like, parts of this Joyce experienced, because I'm sure everybody knows after this and just does that amnesia thing they do.
Yeah, like, was she at her gallery passing out candy? Was she dressed up?
Yeah, what is Joyce experiencing? But yeah, then there's banging on the door, and you have this moment where Buffy finds a picture and starts to, like, kind of connect the dots, and you're like, okay, cool. And then shows some signs of intelligence and stuff, and then, like, completely, like, regresses into this form of, like, Buffy's imagining of what an 18th century girl is, and it's just the worst.
She is a very, very spoiled princess.
But then you have this amazing line from Willow where she's like, she couldn't have dressed up like Xena, and I just adore it.
Love it. And then Cordelia, we see her kind of running out outside, and some kind of monster is chasing her. Mm-hmm. And Xander comes out and saves her, very gallantly. And she goes in, and she's dressed as a cat, like we saw earlier. And Willow's like, okay, your name is Cordelia, you're not a cat. And Cordelia's like, yeah, I know.
I love the logic here. That, like, Willow's like, oh, I'm going to reason with a cat to explain that it's actually a person.
You're not a cat. You're in high school. And then she lets Willow know that she bought her costume somewhere else, which is important later.
Mm-hmm. And then you have this absolutely amazing moment where Xander gives Cordelia her jacket, and Cordelia is just, like, so into it.
Right. Okay. So when he takes off his jacket and puts it on Cordelia, it mentions his giant pumped up biceps covered in tattoos. And at this point, and I watched really closely during the show to see this, both Willow and Cordelia are supposed to be staring at them kind of like surprised. But it's just Cordy looking at him. Yeah. It's not really Willow. But like they're both supposed to be like drooling over his biceps when he does this.
Which I will say, like, I've made the comment that Nicholas Brennan is, like, way buffer than I think they intended Xander to be, so, like, there is a little bit of that. You get that again at the end of this season with Go Fish, where you're just like, oh, yeah, Xander has a nice body. But the way that Charisma Carpenter plays that little moment of just kind of, like, looking over at Xander and just like, ooh.
Yeah.
I enjoy it a lot.
So then Willow leaves. And we don't really know where she's going, but she ends up going to Giles to get help, which makes sense. I don't know why no one did it earlier.
Yeah.
And then we have Spike, a little view of him outside on the street watching all the demons and stuff run by. And he says, well, this is just neat. Which, by the way, I used to have as a ringtone on my phone for a long time.
It's one of those lines that, like, oddly reminds me of Willow's "that was nifty" line in the series finale. Like, it's so wholesome and I love it. And it's so, like, weirdly understating the situation at hand.
I used to have a whole lot of Spike one-liners on my computer as notification stuff and on my phone as notification stuff. Then we have Buffy and Xander kind of talking to each other in their people they're supposed to be, and it's pretty funny. And they find a picture of the three of them, and Xander's like, she must be right. You know, we did know each other.
We must have some kind of amnesia.
I don't know what that is, but I'm certain I don't have it. I bathe quite often.
How do you explain this?
I don't. I was brought up a proper lady. I wasn't meant to understand things. I'm just meant to look pretty, and then someone nice will marry me. Possibly a baron.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
It's like, yeah, everything about the portrayal of the 18th century girl that Sarah Michelle Gellar does in this, it really feels like a 16-year-old girl's perception of what that person would be, which kind of fits with like how I interpret this spell to work really well. And it's really delightful. I love her accent. That's just not really a great accent, but works really well with the notion that this is like how Buffy thinks this person would talk. I mean, it's really, really funny. And it's just one of my favorite. I love when they let Sarah Michelle Gellar just do like kind of weird comedy things and just have her do something that's very not Buffy. We get that a few times through, and it's always like, a spell has caused her to just completely lose all of her Buffiness and be somebody else, and it's just hilarious every time that they let Sarah Michelle Gellar play like that.
And then Angel shows up.
Yep.
Says, it's total chaos out there, and they're all like, who are you? We skip to a scene where Giles is working in the library, working in the card catalog.
Yeah, because we've established that Giles literally never leaves the library.
Yes, Willow comes in through a wall, and Giles just it's like the perfect, like he lets go of these cards up in the air and they just go everywhere.
Yeah.
It's so perfect. And I don't know how many times they did it to get that scene, but it is wonderful.
It's over the top, but in the best way possible. Yeah. And it just delights me to no end. Every time I see it, it cracks me up. Like, every time I'm just like, okay, I gotta be prepared for this. And I'm never fully prepared because it's always just a little bit more ridiculous than I remember it being. It's one of my favorite moments in this episode, though. It's absolutely just the funniest stuff. And it is one of the places...
I really want to know how long. I really want to know how many times they had to do that to get that right.
Well, it is. I wrote these notes very hastily, but like it is one of the places where I used a word that we're not allowed to use on this podcast because of us trying to keep it PG. But like, I just basically wrote Willow scares the blank out of Giles, and that was my entire note for this entire scene. And I was like, that's all I need.
I'll remember this.
I love so many things about this episode. You just don't think too hard about it, and it's one of the best. But yeah, back at the house, Angel's trying to figure out what's going on, and then Cordelia comes in and explains in the most Cordelia way possible.
Yes. I don't know who they are. Everyone's become a monster. It's a thing.
How are you?
I love it. Yeah, how are you? Okay, then they split up to try to defend the house, and Cordelia goes with Xander, and Buffy goes with Angel. And Angel, they go to the kitchen, and Angel's like, I didn't leave that door open, because the back door is open. And then he shuts it and turns around, and there's a vampire behind Angel. Now, here's my question. How'd this vampire get in the house?
So I think this supports my theory that it's the person's dressed up perception of what a vampire is, and this person just didn't know the invite rule.
Quite
or
possibly.
It could be that it's not, since it's not technically actually a vampire, it doesn't apply because it technically isn't a vampire. So there's a couple different ways that you could kind of explain it away.
I thought that, but I thought of those things too, but I had to mention it because I have in my notes, can they do that in their costumes? Just because they're not real?
Well, and it would just it would make you wonder, like, if they, managed to stay in this form until sunlight, what would happen?
If they know that vampires turn into dust.
Yeah. Like, would they turn into dust if they perceive that that's what happens to vampires? Would none of them turn to dust because they're not actually vampires? There's a lot of question marks.
Well, here's my question. Now, Willow tells Xander that he can't shoot any of the demons and bad guys and stuff because they're little kids in there. Mm-hmm. Here's my thing. Everyone in this town does not have a Willow. And someone's freaking out because, a 3-foot tall demon is after them.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody has fought back.
Oh, yeah.
So there are kids that have been hurt.
Oh, when you really think about it, there are kids that have been injured, killed, who are lost, like completely lost at the end of this, because they've all scattered. So none of them are with their parents. They're in a beehive somewhere or something. They're everywhere. Yeah. And then beyond that, we also establish the fact that they all remember this. So even in the best case scenario, they still have a traumatic experience that they lived through where they remember turning into a monster.
Yeah. But some of these kids, when this is over, do they wake back up? Are they not dead? Or if they get killed like this, are they actually dead? Because somebody is, getting their pistol out of the safe and shooting them out the front door.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody in this town is doing that.
Oh,
Probably more than one somebody.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. If you think about the aftermath of this episode, it does not work.
It does not
work.
Because
then the teenagers have to take all these kids back to the school for their parents to pick them up. And I'm guessing they're all pretty traumatized. And that's the ones that are not needing to go to the ER.
I believe I mentioned in last week's podcast when we were talking about this one being next, I was just like, this is a great episode, except when you really analyze it, and then you realize it falls apart horribly.
Yeah. But meanwhile, Angel is fighting the vampire and starts yelling for Buffy to give him a steak, and he turns to her with his vampire face, and she takes off. Mm-hmm. And she knows that this is a vampire. Because when she runs into him later, she says he's a vampire. So, even as her 18th century self, she sees his face and knows it's a vampire face.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps it's because this is a representation of a girl that was in a Watcher's diary, so...
She should know.
She should know, maybe?
Good point.
I don't know. She should probably also know that cars aren't demons, but whatever.
Then we go back to Willow and Giles in the library. And they're discussing what happened, and Giles kind of asks her what her costume is, and she says, I'm a ghost. And he says, of what? Exactly. Because, she's a rocker babe.
She's a rocker babe ghost.
Yeah.
It's a costume with many layers.
Yeah. Then she starts talking about Cordelia's costume, because it's worse. Although I don't really think it is.
No.
Cordelia's at least covered. And Giles is like, oh my gosh, Cordelia became an actual feline? And that's when they realize that only the costumes from Ethan's costume shop turned the wearers into what they are. Mm-hmm. And Willow tells him that they got theirs at a new place called Ethan's. And I think that it doesn't say it in the script book, but I think that Giles's look was supposed to be more. Yeah. And that it just got cut. Because you kind of see him realize, and I think you were supposed to see a little bit more of that.
Yeah. Perhaps.
He knows as soon as he heard Ethan.
Yeah. I think it works the way that they did cut it to where it still kind of adds a little touch of on rewatches, you're like, oh, he has a little bit of a reaction there, but it's not so much that it's spoiling the fact that, he knows who Ethan is later on. It's a careful balance that you have to have there to make that work. But there is a little bit of a reaction that you see start to form there. And I do like that subtlety that they play with in that moment.
And then we go back to the other group, and Xander, Angel, and Cordelia are looking for Buffy and start talking about how she's helpless, and Spike overhears. Mm-hmm. And he is very excited.
Yep. And then he encourages a bunch of kids to go hunt her, which is just the most Spike thing ever.
Yeah. And then we have Giles and Willow at Ethan's costume shop, and they just walk inside because apparently it's unlocked. Because everything in Sunnydale's unlocked. Yeah. Museums, zoos, funeral homes. Nothing's locked.
Right. Why would you bother? It's a very safe town.
So Giles and Willow are looking for, the owner of the costume shop, and they see him. And as soon as Giles sees him, he tells Willow, "Get out. Go now." And she's like, "No." And he goes, "Yeah, now." And she does. And they say hello to each other, and we're like, "Ooh, Giles, you got a past."
Yeah, not only do they say hello to each other, but they say hello to each other using Ethan
Nickname.
and Ripper. Ripper is just like one of the most menacing nicknames I think that you could possibly have.
And then we go to Buffy, and she has run into Larry, the pirate. And the reason I mentioned about his pirate eye patch earlier is because that is apparently the only part of the costume that he bought. Obviously from Ethan's costume shop. So just the eye patch turned him into a pirate.
Yeah, it's a very powerful spell.
Oh, very powerful. Just the eye patch turned him into a pirate, and he's pretty and kind of, attacks Buffy. And then Xander attacks the pirate, so basically attacks Larry. And Buffy runs and grabs onto Cordelia while Xander and Larry fight.
No. Like in the show, Cordelia actually runs up to Buffy and asks if she's okay, and I'm just like, whoa!
Yeah.
This is incredible. But yeah, this is when Buffy's just like, oh no, he's a vampire, and Cordelia, again, still not accepting the fact that Angel's a vampire at first, and then it's just like, whatever, it's okay, he's a good vampire.
Yeah, he's our friend. And Xander gets through beating up Larry, and it's like, hey, I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Then Willow shows up saying, you got to get inside, Spike's coming, and there's Spike. And so they all take off running, and we switch back to Ethan and Giles, kind of discussing how Giles is different now and pretending to be good and a protector and stuff. And Giles is like, oh, I am. And then we get to see
Ripper.
A new side of Giles.
We get to see Ripper.
He tells Ethan to break the spell. And Ethan's like, well, what do I get if I do? And Giles says, you get to live. And Ethan's like, oh, you're scary. And then gets knocked out with a punch from Giles.
Oh, it's like so
It's
sudden.
awesome.
And it's one of those things, Tony had plays this moment very similar to that little bit of moment at the end of Reptile Boy that I mentioned, where he just completely decimates so handily, like just without any real effort, just completely takes Ethan down. And it's just so glorious to watch every time. But everything about this scene is fantastic. I think this is one of the scenes that really, really works in this episode as far as building something for the future. Because a lot of this episode falls apart when you think about the context of the series as a whole, because Buffy doesn't really act like Buffy, and the Xander knowledge later on doesn't really make sense. But this scene here is so pivotal for the entire show and makes this episode an absolute must-watch episode because of what it does for Giles' character. And it's so jarring watching this as a fan to see how different and yet very much the same he is. I particularly like the line where he says, it's not an act, it's who I am. And that feels true. Like, it feels like the, weird, bumbling, kind of Giles that we've come to know and love is very much who he is. But he is also Ripper and can turn that on when it is necessary.
Then we are back in the other group, and we find a warehouse door and go in and start trying to block it, and Spike and everyone kind of break in.
I love that Spike is just waiting as all of these these people who have turned into demons and vampires and whatnot, and are these embodiments, these ideas of what these creatures are. Yet Spike has figured out a way to control them all. They're his minions. He is just waiting there for them to do the work so that he can come through. And they pause and, wait and allow him to, lead them. It's, such a interesting thing where I'm not even sure if it's, a flaw so much as just another showing of how intimidating Spike really can be. Because of his ability to kind of command a room And even, like, in this weird spell, like, state that all of these kids and teenagers and whatnot are in, somehow still manages to take control and become the leader just so fast. So yeah, while this is going on, Giles continues to wail on Ethan, and it kind of cuts back and forth as Spike is approaching Buffy, you know, primed for the kill, talking about how she's a lost lamb, and he just loves it. Well,
I will point out in this scene when they're going back and forth, they have 2 of these demons restraining Angel and 2 restraining Xander, who's supposed to be this big buff military guy. And I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it.
Finally, Ethan gives in and tells him to break the statue, and Giles picks it up and smashes it into the ground, as Willow's telling Xander that he can, in fact, shoot Spike, which I love that line.
I think she should have told him earlier.
But I do enjoy that line. It's like, you can shoot him.
Yeah.
But yeah, Giles breaks the statue, and you get this lovely, like, slow reveal of, like, Spike realizing that, in fact, he is surrounded by a bunch of school children and is holding a wig. And then you have the glorious, "Hi, honey, I'm home," and then Buffy just wailing on Spike.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, you know, Spike kind of just scampers out.
Mm-hmm.
And Xander's like, "Hey, Buffy, welcome back. You too." And they're talking about it, and we're saying that they both were in there, but couldn't get out, which is really, really scary when you think about all the children.
Oh, yeah. Like, that line specifically.
They're in there, but can't get out. Like,
yeah. Oh.
the little bumblebee baby, is it in there and can't get out? Or the demons? You know?
Yeah. It's really just the worst. It's the most terrifying thing. And, like, there is a moment earlier where, like, Giles is talking about just how sick this spell is. But it's such, like, a funny, wacky episode that you don't really think about it until you really break it down. These little moments that hint to this. And the fact that, you know, Giles has this line of just, like, how twisted this spell is, and you really think about it, you're like, oh yeah, no, Giles immediately knows how bad this is. Like, Giles understands just how sick Ethan is and how far he went to do something like this. But you don't get any of those, like, nothing's actually in the show to represent just how traumatic what has happened really is for Sunnydale at large.
And a lot of times there's not in the show. You have to think of the aftermath.
Mm-hmm.
Because I assume that the 4 kids from the pack are, like, still in therapy today.
Oh, yeah. As Buffy and Xander and Cordelia are kind of, like, reflecting about the night, Angel walks up, and then, like, Buffy and Angel just, like, gaze at each other and just, like, completely, like, melt into each other's eyes. I was like, what was all of that weird conflict that you had at the beginning of the episode where you were convinced that you weren't actually his type? Because holy crap, that moment right there was enough to convince me that
yeah.
y'all are pretty much guaranteed to be each other's type. I don't think that there's any doubt there at that point. Mm-hmm. But they walk off, and Cordelia's like, and Xander has the lovely line, is like, you're never going to get between those two.
Yeah, believe me, I know. Yeah. And then he's like, where's Willow? And we go to Willow, and she is back to where she was when the spell first took effect, and kind of wakes up. She's not a ghost anymore.
Yeah.
And she stands up, and she's been going this whole time as a ghost in her rocker babe costume. Mm-hmm. So she picks up her sheet and starts to put it back on and changes her mind and throws it down. Mm-hmm. Which I love. She's all confident now.
Oh, yeah.
And then we see her walk across the street in front of Oz's van. At which point he asks, who is that girl again?
Yeah. Can I just say, I love Oz's van. I love that it's clearly like a European vehicle because the steering wheel's on the wrong side. I love the exterior and the zebra print of it. It's my favorite thing. It's so good.
I love that their band is called Dingoes Ate My Baby. Like,
There's that too. Also, during this moment, there's another song, which is How She Died by Treble Charger, and I just find that amusing after Willow spent the entire episode as a ghost.
Yeah.
Then you have the probably biggest cementing Buffy and Angel as a ship scene of this exchange in Buffy's room. Angel's very casual in Buffy's room. Like,
I mean, do you have to ship Buffy and Angel when they're like a main couple?
well, I think it like is the first like they're actually in a relationship scene.
Okay.
Like-
Like, I always thought the shipping them are always characters that don't ever get together.
No, you can ship like actual canon couples.
Okay.
Yeah. The nuances of shipping is a complicated matter, but
Oh, of
you can
course.
ship anybody you want to ship, whether they're canon or non-canon, or whether they make any sense or whatever. Believe me, I have had many Angel Spike shipping moment watching this show, and I know that's not happening.
Oh yeah, definitely. I know you can ship characters that are not ever together. But I just figured, if they were together, it was just them as a couple. It wasn't shipping.
It's still shipping. What I was trying to get at with my talking about this scene is like I feel like this is the true like this is a relationship. This
finally happened.
Yeah, this is it. Like this is their boyfriend girlfriend now.
Yes, definitely.
And like completely the level at which Angel is totally relaxed in this like shows that they've kind of gotten to this point, because if you think about different times that Angel has been in Buffy's room prior to this, very different way of him like behaving. He is like lounging on her bed, like just draw me like one of your French girls lounging on the bed. He is very, very relaxed, and they have flirty talk and a little bit of a back and forth and start making out.
I always wished I could meet someone exciting, interesting.
Really? Interesting how?
You know how.
Still, I had a really hard day. You should probably tell me.
You're right. I should.
Definitely.
And then we have the final little teaser at the end where Giles has entered into Ethan's store, which has been completely cleared out, and finds a note card left that says, "Be seeing you." And we have Giles staring directly into the camera in this shot that I kind of just adore, and also made me think, is this the only time that they break the fourth wall other than like something related to Once More with Feeling?
I don't know if I consider that breaking the fourth wall. I kind of see it as he's like staring off into the distance.
Oh, he's staring directly at the camera though, and that's a big no-no.
But I don't think he's supposed to be. Like, I don't think it was meant to be a break the fourth wall. I think they meant that to literally be staring off in the distance and wanted to get a shot of his face as he did it. Looking all firm and resolute of...
No, I totally read that as breaking the fourth wall, just because I know how big of a rule that is, that you never stare into the camera. You never look directly into the camera unless there's an intentional reason to, and the only real reason to is to break the fourth wall. And that is a moment where it's just another one of those. It's a strategy used when you're trying to build like this character to be potentially like suspicious, like they know something, like they know that they're being watched, or kind of those kind of strategies. I think it's planted there specifically because we're hinted at Giles's past, but we don't really understand it, and I think it's one of those little teases that we get a couple of, and I know a lot of fans really, really kind of hoped that it would have happened, but is a little tease to the possibility of Giles as a villain, which never really happens, but it is one of those, like, that's how I read the scene, is that's them teasing to the potential of Giles being an antagonist to Buffy or to the main gang at some point in the series later on, because of just how menacing that look is.
No, possible.
The Buffy writers and everybody, like, in the production team are notorious for planting so many seeds constantly, which is why they get so many, like, wonderful foreshadowing moments, because there's a lot of seeds that they plant that don't really become anything.
But you never think about those.
When you're planting
about
seeds like crazy, when you're planting seeds like crazy, eventually you're going to get some of them right. And I think this was one of those potential seeds that they planted that they didn't actually do anything with. But that little look into the camera gives me chills every time. Like, I'm just like, oh man, I do not want to face that guy. He is scary.
But no one ever does.
Well, you know, Willow, but that's extenuating circumstances.
But he's terrifying when he faces Willow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Terrifying.
He's so Tony Head. Can we just have a moment to appreciate Tony Head? A moment of silence to appreciate Tony Head to finish this podcast off.
Oh yes, he's amazing.
All right, moment's over.
I want him to be the Doctor for a couple of seasons so bad.
So next week's a big one. I am super excited to talk about Lie to Me. It is absolutely one of the most pivotal episodes in all of Buffy, and it will be one to really, really talk about.
I am very interested to hear about that because I do not see it as a big one or pivotal episode at all.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge.
Okay, I'm not remembering something.
We're going to talk about that episode. We're going to talk. But no, I'm excited for that discussion now. I'll get to, like, do my whole Buffy speech. Maybe
I'll catch it when I watch it, because I will admit it's been a long time since I've watched season 2.
It's a big mission statement episode. So we're going to talk about that for sure. And there's some other things
I can
for sure.
Believe. Like that it's mission statement, because I remember the episode.
Yeah.
I guess I don't see it as relevant as you do, but we will have fun talking about that then. And I might change my mind as I rewatch it too.
I will. Perhaps I will blow your mind in our conversation for the next podcast. Quite possibly. You never know what's going to happen. But thank you all so much for listening. And this is where we say bye.
Bye.